Hello and welcome to Scream Scene, the horror movie podcast where we watch every horror movie ever made in chronological order and then we rank them from best to worst. My name's Sarah.
And I'm Ben.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Ben, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay, I think.
Yeah?
Yeah. I feel like it's been a real up and down week for me, just in terms of like, I don't know, mental health stuff. But for the most part, like, things are good.
I mean, this last week we had our wedding anniversary, so I would hope that would be hitting the ups.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
We've been married for 8 years.
Yikes.
And no, it's a good thing.
It's very much a good thing. It just makes me feel very old.
Oh. Yeah, we had a really nice anniversary. We got each other one Steam Deck.
We each got each other a Steam Deck.
Yeah, but it's one. We each got each other half a Steam Deck to make for one Steam Deck.
Yes.
So we've been enjoying playing around with that all weekend, basically. So I don't know if you're thinking about getting a Steam Deck and you want to know more, hit us up on Twitter, I guess. Or so yeah, I'm doing okay. I'm a little tired. I need to be taking a break pretty soon here.
Finally taking the advice that everyone is giving you.
Yeah, everyone's been telling me that I'm suffering from burnout. So, you know, somewhere in the next little while, I got to take a break. But my job wants me to instead work double hours next month. So we'll see how that all goes. But I'm doing mostly pretty good. I'm pretty happy with things. How are you, Sarah?
I am also feeling mostly okay about things. As part of Steam Deck, I bought and played through the game Stray, aka Cat Game. It's very good. It hit a lot of my feels. It hit a lot of the sci-fi themes that I always gravitate towards and always find resonate with my soul a lot. So it was a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely would recommend playing Stray. Yeah, that's kind of it for me. Yeah. What are we watching this week?
This week, Sarah, we are watching Ein TOTER HING im NETZ, which is German. That translates as A Corpse Hung in a Web from 1960, directed by Fritz Böttger.
So are these are these big spiders?
I don't know.
Oh.
I don't really know. I think a guy gets mutated into a kind of man spider.
Okay.
If you're new to the show, Sarah has arachnophobia. Pretty bad.
I would say it's not pretty bad. I would say it's okay. I've been working hard to make it okay, but spiders definitely are a challenge.
I feel like you were doing pretty well when we lived in a place with a large backyard where you were doing like a lot of gardening. You were trying to find some like zen in your relationship with spiders.
Yeah, because it's like I'm in your space, so it also allowed me to have some like exposure therapy, I guess. It's a little more hard now here in the townhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Castle Scream Scene, because our basement likes to attract spiders, and I'm trying to be chill about it. When they get to a certain size, they have to go. But I've seen a few like smaller spiders and tried to be chill because I recognize that having spiders in a house is actually good because it keeps those other bugs away.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard. It's hard because now they're in my space.
Yeah. You have issues with spiders. You also have issues with zombies. Those are like...
There's no zombies in this, is there?
I don't think so. It's 1960. I think we're just dealing with man spiders.
Okay.
So this film comes to us from German producer Wolf C. Hartwig, who also produced Die Nackte unter Satan, the Naked Woman and the Satan, which we watched in episode 274 and is ranked number 124 on the list currently. So this is yet another, like that movie, this is yet another one of Hartwig's Sittenfilme or Vice films, kind of horror exploitation projects.
I do not remember this other movie.
The title has nothing to do with the story, so it was very like poor marketing, I guess you could say.
Oh, yeah. I remember now looking up the synopsis. Yeah, great. For context around Germany of this time as well, because this is, I guess this film, the Man Spider film, it is our second film since pre-World War II in Germany. So we are in West Germany?
Yes, this is West Germany. I should clarify that.
So for, a brief history of Germany, you can listen to episode 274 and get all that good context.
So this is sort of another exploitation project from the same producer, another horror exploitation movie. Hartwig observed when sort of embarking on the journey of producing this movie that, in his opinion, all it took to have a box office winner for one of these movies was a good monster and some naked women.
I mean, according to Hollywood, he's not wrong.
Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the attitude of the movie's producer going in, is we need a monster and we need some naked chicks, and that's all you need for a good movie.
Okay.
So the project was written and directed by Fritz Böttger, a German actor, writer, and director. His background was as a dancer, and he initially joined the film industry in 1938 as a choreographer, before then becoming an actor, then a writer, then a director. He was born in 1902, and he passed away in 1981. The lead actor in this film is Alexander Darcy, who was born Alexander Saruf in Cairo, in Egypt in 1908.
Oh.
He appeared in nearly 50 films over his career, and he kind of regularly bounced between America and Europe. So he would do like Hollywood films, and then he would go to Europe and do mostly French films, but lots of different European films. He kind of had a home in France and a home in Hollywood that he would bounce between. His first feature film was The Garden of Allah in 1927. And through the 30s and 40s, he kind of established himself playing like suave or roguish kind of characters. By the 1950s and 60s, his career had diminished, and he was mostly appearing on TV and in horror movies. But he was also a favorite character actor for like maverick filmmakers, I guess you could call them.
Maverick.
Roger Corman, Russ Meyer, and Sam Fuller used him a lot in the late 60s and early 70s.
Okay, so in horror movies or kind of more exploitation kind of movies?
Well, Roger Corman, we know him. Russ Meyer basically invented softcore porn. And Sam Fuller did like The Wild Bunch and like a lot of like movies that push the boundaries for like violence and stuff, right? So a bunch
that's
of
what you mean by Maverick. Okay.
Yeah, a bunch of like grindhouse directors liked to use this guy as a character actor, basically.
Okay.
Sort of the way that like Tarantino would pluck actors from 30 years ago and bring them back in his movies. Alexander Darcy passed away in Hollywood in 1996. This film was shot in Yugoslavia in the fall of 1959 with Jörg Krause as cinematographer. He's probably best known for shooting Stanley Kubrick's Paths of Glory in 1957.
Okay.
The film was released in West Germany on April 16th, 1960. It was originally released in the US as like a nudie movie. Like that was the market it was released in March.
Not to be confused with like 3D.
No, nudie.
Yeah,
you're making a joke.
I'm
I get
making
you.
a joke.
No, I'm with you. It was released in the nudie markets in March of 1962 with the title It's Hot in Paradise, dubbed into English by Pacemaker Pictures. And then
so named because they get your heart pumping, I
guess, yeah. It was later re-released in November 1967 with the nude scenes cut out, which lowers the running time from 86 minutes to 75 minutes.
Wow.
As just like a straight horror film. And at that point, it was given the title Horrors of Spider Island. And it was booked as a double feature with a re-edited version of The Flesh and the Fiends called The Fiendish Ghouls. In that version, it was featured as episode 11 of season 10 of Mystery Science Theater 3000, and it was released uncut on Blu-ray and DVD by Severin Films.
Uncut, unrated.
Yeah.
So which version are we going to be watching?
So we're going to be watching the original German version, Ein TOTER, HING im NETZ.
And that translates to corpse in the web?
It's almost like pretty literal. Ein TOTER, a corpse. Hing im Netz, hung in a web.
A corpse hung in the web.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
And if you'd like to watch along, it's on our YouTube playlist as well.
Okay. Well, folks, you can find that playlist on our website, screamscenepodcast.com. You're going to hear a brief musical interlude, and when we come back, we will discuss Ein TOTER, HING im NETZ, aka A Corpse in the Web, from 1960, directed by Fritz Böttger.
See you on the other side, everybody. Welcome back, everybody. We just finished watching Ein TOTER, HING im NETZ from 1960, directed by Fritz Böttger. Sarah, what did you think?
The title is accurate in that there is a corpse hung in a web.
Right.
It's also accurate in there being horrors on an island.
With a spider.
With a spider.
Yep.
Overall, I found this movie a little tiring. It kept forgetting it was a horror movie.
Somehow in this nudie horror movie, there wasn't enough nudity or horror.
Yeah.
Well, it shouldn't take us too long to run down the story since not much happens.
What do you mean? A ton of stuff happens. There's not stuff I need to mention on here. When we open, we see that there is a guy named Gary. He is a show manager, and he has his secretary, Georgia. They are hiring dancers, at least 12 in New York, to go on a show that's going to be performing in Singapore. Unfortunately, their plane goes down as they are traveling the Pacific, and Gary, Georgia, and 7 other ladies are the only survivors. They drift to a remote island. Luckily, they happen to find a cabin. Unfortunately, inside the cabin is a man in the web, reading his diaries, which, come on, guys, this is supposed to be private. They learn that this
Sarah,
man...
you do terribly in a survival horror game. How are you supposed to learn the story at all if you don't go through and read everyone's journals?
This man is a professor. He was researching uranium deposits on this island. Now, everyone is like, cool, let's stay at this cabin for the night. And one of the ladies, Linda, she makes moves on Gary. Gary starts making out with her, and Georgia doesn't like this because Georgia and Gary are kind of an item. They're not married or anything. So Gary is like, ugh, it was this heat that made me do that. And he goes off on a walk to kind of cool down. And then he is attacked by a giant spider. Asterisk. Giant spider in the D&D sense. Because when you have a giant spider or you turn into a giant spider, it's like a spider that is dog-sized. Giant in relation to a typical sized spider.
Yes. This giant spider has... It's like...
On its legs, they, instead of ending in a foot, they end in a few claws that makes it look like a hand.
Yes.
And then sometimes the way that they have it posing, it looks like it's an Italian spider.
Yes.
That's gesturing as it speaks spider language.
It's about the size of a horseshoe crab. It's got a big head with 2 big black eyes. And then, it's forwardmost claws look like they have hands on them. So, mutant giant spider.
Yes, it is not natural.
Mm-hmm.
Now, lucky for Gary, he manages to pull off the spider and shoot it full of bullets before he dies. Unfortunately, it means that he turns into some kind of half man, half spider mander.
Yeah, some sort of were-spider.
Were-spider.
Man-spider.
Well, that implies that he only turns on the full moon.
Sure. He looks like a man, except that he's got kind of a weird monster face now and claw hands.
Yes.
It is an instantaneous transformation.
The next day, everyone at the cabin goes looking for Gary. They all split up in teams of 2 or 3, and Linda stays at the cabin, where she is attacked and killed. Now, there are women here who are in hysterics. They're in a panic. They're like, how are we ever going to get off this island? No one ever stops here. We're fucked. Like, people are dying left, right, and center. What are we going to do? One of them even looks like she's about to jump off a cliff. 28 days later, no one else has died, but they have about 3 days of rations left. A ship goes by, they try to get its attention, it keeps going, so they're really feeling like there's no hope. Then, Bob and Joe arrive to meet up with the professor. They're bringing him some supplies, and they are surprised to find a ton of ladies on this island. Now, Bobby, he's a ladies' man and immediately hooks up with Gladys. He goes and he's like trying to hook up with all of the other ladies. They are also interested in hooking up. Joe begins to make moves with Anna, so just a single person. We get many scenes of dancing, etc., and Bobby goes to meet up with Gladys. She goes and like tries to find him on the path and discovers that he has been killed off screen. Suddenly she is chased by Spider Gary, and she ends up being chased off a cliff and she falls to her death. Now, in the midst of all of this, it is at nighttime, so there's at least that. But Joe and Georgia end up hiding in the cabin just as Gary barges in. And Georgia recognizes that it's Gary. That kind of stops him from attacking her, so there is some sort of semblance of humanity still in him. And then he gets into fisticuffs with Joe. They manage to light some flares, and between Joe and Georgia and the rest of the ladies, they drive Gary into the quicksand, the famous quicksands of Spider Island, and they are rescued the next day. The end.
Yeah, that's basically it.
So despite there being so many people on this island, we only get a total of 4 deaths, and one of those is including Gary.
Yes.
Into the quicksand. It's just like, give me more death. On the bright side, Ben, it meant not a lot of spider screen time.
Sure. I think that on one hand, this is exactly the movie that you get with these sorts of parameters and not a lot of money or talent being put behind it. Like, hey, I'm going to give you this many girls. They're all going to be like sexy babes. They've got to be in various states of undress throughout the movie. You're going to go shoot this in like a park in Yugoslavia somewhere. There's going to be this cabin. You have like a monster mask and some monster gloves. Make a movie. Like,
well, I want to contest what you said about no talent, because they are achieving what they're setting out to do.
Sure.
They aren't one take Bodine. Like, they are trying to do this movie.
Sure.
When they are doing horror, they do achieve doing horror. They do some neat lighting and stuff with shadows when we're focused on Gary in the bushes. It's just that they frequently forget that they're in a horror movie and that they need to be making this horror.
I think that what I meant by that was that they aren't really like exceeding the like base expectations of a movie like this. Like,
they got a C.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a lot of padding for time here.
Yes.
That somehow manages to make the premise of like a bunch of nightclub dancers stuck on an island with a man spider boring. And I totally agree with you that like the biggest problem here is that not enough of the girls die. When you've got this big cast, like the reason to have a big cast like this in a horror movie is to kill most of them off.
Yeah. And I feel like the film almost sets it up that George is going to be our final girl. Mm-hmm. You could have had like 1 or 2 other final girls, but we have 6 ladies at the end.
Yeah. And because of that, not enough happens in this movie. And, you know, when I say that there's not enough nudity or horror here, like the nudity that occurs, there's like a scene where because it's like hot and we're not getting rescued and we're out of food or whatever, some of the girls like have an inevitable cat fight at one point where some clothes get torn off. And then there's another scene where they know they're going to get rescued and everyone's really happy and getting drunk and they decide to all like dance and frolic around naked for a while. Everyone's trying to get with Bobby and so on. And that's about it for the nudity. And it's like,
well, they do go swimming in that lagoon.
Right. There's some skinny dipping. But like what they should have had is a lot more attacks on the girls by the man spider and like the man spider tearing off people's clothes as it's like attacking them in the jungle and stuff. And instead, like, there's a long stretch of this movie where the only thing the man spider does is kind of like go to reach for someone from behind a bush, and then they like brush him off and move on, and they aren't actually attacked. And I feel like if you had sort of spread out the girl deaths through the movie's runtime and had a death every 10 minutes or so, you would have kept the pacing up a bit, and you could have sprinkled in the nudity throughout, rather than kind of having this like one really long interminable kind of dance scene where they're dancing and partying that kind of just goes on forever.
Yeah, it is wild that they made a scene go on for what feels like forever, but it's supposed to be a tantalizing, titillating in more ways than one kind of scene.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just like, why? What is, can we like move on, please?
It's kind of this weird thing of like, I don't know how much of the dissatisfaction I feel with this movie is because I'm from 2023. And what I mean by that is this is sort of like, granted, this is a horror movie podcast, so we only have the horror movies of the time to compare this to. We're not comparing this to like other sexploitation films of this period, but I feel like this movie has, you know, a boundary pushing amount of nudity in it, but there are no sex scenes. The nudity is, like I said, it either is in a catfight scene or this scene where they're kind of like dancing and having a good time and people's titties are out, and that's about it. And it's almost like that's, from a 2023 perspective, too tame to be exciting to watch on its own.
Well, here's the thing. I see what you're saying, but the dance scene, sure, it's like, oh, she's not wearing underneath that flower boa, for lack of a better...
Lay?
Well, because it's not a necklace.
Sure.
And then it's 10 minutes of, like, here she is flirting and dancing with Bobby. Bobby starts making out with someone else as she dances around them. And it just feels like it is a 10-minute long sequence that is not exciting because the camera is like, oh, look at Bobby making out. Look at Bobby making out over here.
It doesn't really go anywhere. There's no, like...
forward momentum.
Yes, exactly. Like, you kind of need to either have it be like a strip scene where they start out in more clothes and gradually have less clothes as the dancing goes on, or he needs to like move from flirting to dancing to fucking, or like something. You need some sort of progression throughout this scene. Otherwise, it just kind of goes on for too long. Or the other thing that you should be doing in a movie like this, in a sexy horror movie, is you should be intercutting horror and sex.
Yeah.
So you should be having like sexy babes with their tits out dancing around with Bobby and like getting frisky, getting horny, and then like intercut that with like one of the girls getting chased through the woods by the monster and like it's grabbing at her and she's screaming, and kind of increase the pace of your intercutting as you're moving towards the climax of both like the sexy scene and the horror scene. Like there's technique here that you can do.
And I don't know if it's just that like that technique has not been refined by this point, which is like absolutely fair.
Mm-hmm.
But this movie gives a little bit of whiplash with its tone shifts.
Yeah.
Because it starts with sexy babes auditioning in the ways that you would anticipate a sexploitation movie doing. Horror.
Mm-hmm.
Long stretch of sexy babes.
Mm-hmm.
Little bit of horror. The end.
Well, the long stretch of sexy babes also has a bunch of tone shifts in it too, because there's sort of a portion of this movie that's like a
melodrama. Oh no, is Gladys falling for Bobby who's going after everyone else? Will Bobby learn to step up?
Yeah, will like Anne and Joe get together? Like who's with who? Yeah, so there's like this soap opera element. There's also like a stretch of the movie that's kind of like a watch these women in a desperate situation kind of slowly tear themselves to pieces as they try to survive kind of section.
Which is, you know, good to have in a horror movie in like this context of like you're stranded on an island. Like
Sure.
they were doing some of that near the end before it was 28 Days Later. The fact also, it should not have been 28 days. It should have been like, we have 7 days of rations here. And so it's like much more compressed. It feels reasonable that like they like tensions are super, super high, because it's not 28 days where like, oh yeah, that's lots of time to hopefully get someone's attention.
I think one of the problems here is like, as we've said, they should have been spreading out the horror more and killing off girls throughout rather than just at the start and the end. But I think that I think this is also why Gary is not only bitten by the man spider, but he also successfully kills it, is like they wanted to have this whole sequence of like these guys showing up in the island, which like makes sense to me that like these guys show up because you need to introduce like some new characters into the mix to kind of change things up near the end of the movie.
Do you though?
But like what they wanted was this, like, even part of this bit of the movie is played for comedy, which, like, again, coming back to those tone shifts, but this idea of these guys who show up and they're like, oh man, like working on this deserted island with the professor, like we've got all this stuff here, but we're going to be away from like women for so long, and all I really want is a babe. And then like, oh my God, we've come across Babe Island, right? But it was like someone...
Wait a minute, is that Babe Ruth?
Someone realized that like if the girls had been dying all throughout to the point where like maybe there's only 2 or 3 left by the time these guys show up, then we couldn't have like this fun, sexy, like party with the girls thing, because they wouldn't psychologically like be in the mind of that. Where if it's like, oh, we found the spider, it's dead, we know we're safe, we just need to get rescued, it makes sense that the girls like are not on edge to the point where they can have this like sexy beach party. But it definitely undercuts the horror movie element, and I feel like the big problem here is that the movie isn't a whole, like it's a horror movie or a sexploitation movie, but it doesn't really know how to put those two things together.
Yeah, that's definitely what's holding this movie back. When it does horror, I think it does horror well, or at least like to the best of their ability. I think the compressed timeline would have really helped that differentiation of those two genres not feel as jarring. I do want to shout out that like the makeup on Gary and the spider puppet were pretty good.
Yeah, for a movie of this kind, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Like I think the producer who wanted babes and a good monster, I think he achieved those two objectives.
Right. I think that like some of the characters are memorable. I really like Georgia as a character, as this kind of like secretary who has like the crush on her boss who goes missing and then has to kind of turn into like the den mother for these like immature women.
But as soon as the boys show up, Joe takes the lead and she doesn't have to do anything.
That's true. I also feel like it's a mistake. Like, okay, so the story is inane, but no one's here for the story. And so I appreciate that they kind of just like very broadly sketch things. Like they show up on the island and it's like, oh, there was a professor here who's dead now and he was looking at uranium. So clearly that's why there's a mutant spider here. Like we, like we're not going to go into depth about this stuff. But on the other hand, I really wish we had gotten to understand more about what happened to Gary and like what Gary Spider's deal is, because he's not like eating the women he kills. Like he goes back and he strangles Linda, and it's almost like, did you come back to strangle Linda because Linda got you in trouble with Georgia?
Yeah, and it also made it seem like the professor, when he was caught in the web, had been strangled and had the puncture wounds.
Right.
And they say that that was the case with Bobby as well.
Yeah, so Bobby gets these puncture wounds in the neck, but like it's not like Gary Spider sucked his blood out or something. Bobby doesn't transform. The professor doesn't transform. He kind of chases after Gladys and she falls off this cliff, but like there aren't really like motivations. Whereas like if he was just like, it's a monster and it's just going to attack you to kill you, like it should be trying to eat them and maul them, not just kind of like attack and then move away and leave like a perfectly pristine body. And the hint that like Gary has some sense of self still, where like he kind of recognizes Georgia, and they even kind of, after forcing him into the quicksand with the flares, kind of imply
Yells
that
at the end, yeah.
Yeah, they kind of imply that Gary like intentionally drowns because it's better to die than live as this thing. So like there's this implication that he's kind of still in there somewhere, but they don't do enough with it, which is really unfortunate because I feel like Alexander Darcy, who plays Gary, actually had some like good screen presence in the early part of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, part of that is this script is like, the only man, you shall take charge. All these women who can barely get off the boat, you will go one by one, take them off the boat, put them on the beach, and we're going to watch you do that for every single one.
For sure, but I was more interested in Gary when he was there than like Joe, when Joe becomes the lead guy.
I completely agree that Joe shouldn't have been the lead guy. We should have stuck with Georgia.
Sure.
In any case.
I'm just trying to say that like the actor has like some screen presence and some charisma that should have been taken advantage of to like delve into what's going on with Gary Spider more. But he kind of just turns into like less of a character and more of like an environmental hazard.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you want to move on to ranking?
Yeah, I don't really have much more to say about this.
Yeah. Cool. I have a spot.
The first place I was looking was at where we ranked the other film from this producer, Die Nacht unter Satan. And I actually think that movie's a much better horror movie than this. I think this probably has better integration of babes, but Die Nacht unter Satan actually did a much better job at being a horror movie. So I don't think this is anywhere near that. So I was looking really low on the list.
Okay.
I do also have a spot picked out.
What is your spot?
I was looking near the bottom of the list and I spotted La Casa del Terror from a couple weeks ago with Lon Chaney. And I thought that was a better horror movie than this. Like that has the Wolfman stuff and it's like got some bad comedy too, but I felt like the Wolfman stuff in that worked better than the Were Spider stuff in this movie. Right below La Casa del Terror is Mesa of Lost Women, which also has a giant spider, is also on an island, also has a bunch of babes in it. This is much better than Mesa of Lost Women. I would much rather watch this again than that. So my spot was right between those two films.
So I also started looking at Die Nacht unter Satan. That's at number 124. And that movie had far too much going on. This at least had two things it was bouncing between.
Right.
So I was like, okay, I'm going to put it here. But above Die Nacht is like El Fantasma del Convento, which is kick-ass. Much better than this movie. So my spot was to just bump down Die Nacht.
Huh. Well, that is
quite a difference between
this, which is weird because I feel like you and I had a pretty similar opinion of this, and I was kind of surprised. Like, I was not expecting you to end up higher than me, if anything.
Like, if I look down, yeah, there's probably better horror movies in here, like White Zombie, Invisible Ghost, The Ghoul is in here.
Yeah.
But if I go down to your spot, I absolutely agree that it's better than Mesa of Lost Women. Looking up, like Attack of the Giant Leeches at 254 manages to make it a horror movie with that melodrama and stuff a lot more cohesively. So actually, now that I kind of think about things, maybe this is the best spot.
Yeah, I think you went too high on that one. I agree with you about the fact that Die Nacht unter Satan has too much going on, but like more of what's going on in that movie is horror movie stuff.
True.
With just a little bit of titillation on the side. And
yeah, because they all kind of fall into the horror movie tropes of like the mad scientist and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas here, it is like kind of looking ahead and like how horror and its exploitation are going to become a lot closer.
Yes.
But it definitely has not figured out that formula.
Yeah, not enough happens here. Like, I could totally see this movie getting remade in the 80s with, like, grosser creature effects, more nudity, and also, like, having it be that slasher formula with, like, very creative gore effects for each kill being totally new and individualistic, right?
Absolutely.
But here, it's too primitive to really hit that. So I agree that like sort of on paper, it's better that this movie has a more cohesive focus, but the biggest flaw of this movie is that not enough actually happens.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so entering the list at the new number 256 is Untitled HING im NETZ from 1960, directed by Fritz Böttger.
If you would like to see this list, you can go to our website, screamscenepodcast.com. There you can find links to the many episodes that we have mentioned today, as well as our appeals box. If you would like to contest this or any other ranking, you can drop us a line through our Ask box on Tumblr, or you can reach out over email at screamscenepodcast@gmail.com.
Scream Scene updates every Wednesday on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, and Spotify. You can support the show by leaving us a rating or a review, subscribing to our RSS feed, or just telling a friend about the show. Word of mouth is the best way for us to grow our audience. If you really want to show your support, you can do so financially by heading on over to our Patreon at patreon.com/screamscenepodcast, where you can become a patron of the night for as little as $1 a month. Patrons at the $5 and $10 level get access to regular bonus content, and that goes a long way towards helping us with continuing to do the show, whether that's with the hosting fees or taking the time out to do the research and watch the films and record the episodes. It also just, we just really appreciate it. It's really nice to have your support. So head on over to patreon.com/screamscenepodcast.
So, Ben, what are we watching next week?
Next week, Sarah, we are back to Italy for L'amante del vampiro, or The Vampire and the Ballerina.
Interesting.
Yeah. It looks like it's going to be another movie trying to mix sex appeal and horror. We'll see if they do a better job.
Let's hope so.
See you next week, Creatures of the Night.
Bye.
Bye.